G'day, my name is Mark Fennell and welcome to Download This Show, your guide to the week in technology, the internet and culture, and yes, it could not be avoided. Apple have launched a brand new Apple Watch, but they're actually one of the last companies to actually do so. So today we're going to compare how Apple's Apple Watch compares to the other products out there for smartwatches. Plus, we've possibly found one of the strangest new gadgets coming out of the States. It combines pepper spray with a camera. How does it work? You'll find out soon. Plus, has Malcolm Turnbull fixed copyright infringement? Probably not, but we're going to discuss it anyway. Please allow me to introduce this week's panel. We have app developer and tech commentator Peter Marks. Welcome back to Download This Show.
Thank you, Mark.
And the news editor for CNET Australia, Claire Riley. Welcome back.
Hey, thanks for having me.
First up, as I said before, yes, Apple did announce a number of products. There was their slightly smaller big new phone, there was their slightly bigger big new phone, and of course, the Apple Watch. It's been rumoured for so very long, but the truth is, we've got Motorola, we've got LG, Pebble. I see you're wearing a Pebble watch now. So how does what Apple have launched today compare to what's going on with the rest of the market?
Well, at the outside, they look all pretty similar. I mean, they're all watches, they tie to a phone, they show you your notifications. We don't know for sure, but it looks like the Apple Watch is running some form of iOS, a stripped down iOS. So it gets all of the view handling stuff, that animation, the physics, all of that sort of stuff which comes from iOS is right there in the watch, which makes it, a very nice platform for developers and, of course, for Apple to build a product which is really cute.
It's interesting. The actual interface itself was a little bit different to what I was expecting. It kind of has these little bubbles that you rotate through, and then, of course, you've got a physical knob that you operate. And I seem like we've been moving away from physical knobs for some time now. This is the largest number of times I've said physical knobs in a radio studio.
I think it's wise to stop saying that.
No more physical knobs?
Yeah, I think
it's an unusual shift in terms of their user interface.
Yeah, I think so. It's it kind of reminded me of a sort of a hive, a honeycomb structure. You've got all those little circles that sort of nest in together and tessellate. Yeah, the digital crown, it's being called. So
people don't say little knob?
Yeah, people don't say little knob. Apple's little knob. Yeah, so it's basically allows you to scroll, to zoom in, and it can be clicked in for use as a home button. There's also another button on the side that's being called the communications button, and that sort of brings up your contacts, and it's designed for quick calling and things. So instead of trying to select that particular icon, why don't we just make it easier if you want to use just to scroll through to be able to do that. But there is still a touch interface. So
yeah, that's the weird thing. It's got everything. It's got touch, it's got press hard, it's got swiping, plus it's got the digital crown, and it's got that one button on the side.
Yeah.
So they've kind of got a foot in every camp.
I mean, obviously you have to have the touch screen so that you can do the draw your own emoji function. I know you were pretty excited about that. But,
that is weird.
Yeah, a little bizarre, but
specifically in terms of the competitors, the main ones here, we're thinking about the Motorola, which is a beautiful, beautiful phone.
The round one.
And the Samsung, and as you say, Samsung have been in this market for a while now. How do they actually compare? What does Apple have that they don't? What do they have that Apple doesn't?
I think Apple's the only one that's got that incredible sensor on the back that actually monitors your heart. So that really puts them in another level in terms of the health applications and being a sensor. It's got the motion sensor and all of that sort of stuff, which I think all of them basically have. So really, it's got Wi-Fi built in, which we didn't hear anything about, but I imagine that they're going to use some of the iOS features like the continuity handoff features to let you, say, view an incoming email on your watch and then hand off either to your phone or even to your Mac. So it kind of integrates better than I think the others do, which are really more focused on being a fancy clock and also a notification center.
Yeah, it's sort of the idea that it's just kind of echoing what your device in your pocket is doing.
Saves you getting it out of your pocket.
Yeah, the other cool thing that I like in the Apple Watch is the NFC capability. So obviously Apple's finally gone to NFC with these launches.
Just for people that haven't heard of NFC before.
Near field communications. I always do that. That simple, easy to use mobile payments facility. It's also used for a number of other things, but that's where they're really pushing with this, the mobile payment space. So you could be wearing your watch and it's got your credit card details saved on file and encrypted. So it might be the credit card you have from iTunes, or it might be a credit card that you get your phone and just kind of take a photo of, and it recognizes your card and it sends it off to be authorized and presumably stored on some cloud that's going to be hacked one day. But
it's inevitable. We might as well just make up
I'm expecting it. But yeah, you just touch your watch against the contactless payment terminal and you can make a payment, which is kind of nifty. That's a cool feature.
All right. Tell me this. Apple entering the market, could that kind of be good for the whole category, just raising the profile of wearable devices?
It's a bit like IBM making a PC. I think it's going to actually make them cool. It's going to make, I mean, as we've noticed, people aren't wearing watches anymore. I sort of am wearing them just because, you know.
It's funny because you two both actually are wearing watches.
Well, yeah, that's right. And look, I'm getting mail as I'm talking. But yeah, look, I think it will make it cool, and I think it will bring it back. And the idea that it is a bit rude to be talking to someone, having dinner, and pulling your phone out and looking at it.
That's why I got to watch. It's amazing. Like you could just, I was in a play last night and you can just sort of readjust your wrist, look down subtly and be like, all right, we're still going on time.
And Apple made quite a play of the fact that the haptic feedback is very subtle, and they said
Don't they call it taptic feedback?
Yeah, taptic. No, that'd be the dumbest name for a chip. Yeah. So the idea is they're saying that person next to you will not even notice, and some of the messaging systems will use things where you can say, hey, honey, why don't we go home early from this dumb party? And the other person can say yes, and you'll get one tap and a different tap if they say
it's
no.
A subtle equivalent of the ear pull.
Yeah. Well,
not that I have a code for leaving parties, but I totally do. And I just told everyone on national radio, idiot Claire. The taptic feedback's also kind of cool in terms of navigation. So you could be mapping a run and it'll say, give you one buzz to turn right, two buzzes to turn left.
I believe it's not just one or two, it's a different feeling
different
of some
kind
sort.
Of
so that's a great idea.
Yeah, but you're still going to use Apple Maps, which means you're still going to end up walking into water or something.
I'm in a
ridiculous.
bridge, buzz, turn around. Yeah, I think it's cool that the buzzes you could slowly learn. And for anyone who's used a device on their wrist, I used a jawbone that could wake you up, and it didn't wake your partner up because it just buzzed on your wrist. And it's amazing. It's really simple and clever, and it's just effective.
Well, I'm glad you brought up jawbone because I'm interested in who stands to lose out of Apple entering this space. I mean, the watch industry is about a $62 billion industry, so obviously the watch industry is concerned. But apart from them, who else is concerned about this, Peter?
Well, we know that Nike has already laid off their whole hardware team, in fact, months in advance, so they clearly knew what was coming. I guess Fitbit and the other makers of these products, is their hardware needed anymore?
What do they do now? So we're talking about fitness bracelets. It's quite a big part of the market at the moment. Lots of people are buying them over Christmas. But if you're in that position, if you're Jawbone, if you're Fitbit, what do you do now?
It's hard because your device doesn't have a screen, and so it relies on the secondary screen of your smartphone. It looks like the back of a simple watch band, really, so it doesn't give you the feedback that you get with a screen device. Now, that's good in a way because it's much lighter and much simpler, so it depends what you're after, but it is certainly a different device.
Apple has provided, I think, the answer to that, which is HealthKit. So they've got an open database, an open API, where devices relating to health can feed their information into this one database for the person to use. So,
to be hacked later on, put on my tinfoil hat.
Now Apple,
you're just putting your peg on it now, so that when it happens, you'd be like, I predicted
I was right, guys.
I predicted it on the ABC.
Right. Yeah.
Everything will be hacked. But look, I mean, what they did actually recently was they said that you must not send people's personal health data up to the cloud, for example. So they are obviously aware of, the possibilities there. But I do think that they're creating kind of an infrastructure where people can make a device. Now, perhaps there's devices that measure, I don't know, cycling better than the built ones are. So they could then feed into HealthKit and have statistics which are gathered. But there's also this concept of a personal trainer, the digital personal trainer that actually watches how much your activity you're getting. I mean, they say sitting is the new smoking. We're all sitting at desks staring at computers, and that is going to kill us. So there's ideas that this thing is watching you and says, you haven't stood up for 2 hours, get up and have
like
a walk.
a 7-pack-a-day girl, if that's the
I
case.
just have this mental image of these ads of like, this is your lung on sitting. One of the things that seems to be very clear is that Apple are really selling it as a fitness band. Why? Because ultimately, I suspect that once people actually start using it, fitness will not be the most useful thing that people end up using it for.
It's the same with, I think, most fitness bands. You kind of try it on, you're like, yeah, I'll do some workouts, and then you're like, I'm just kind of interested in my steps now, and then I'm just going to monitor my sleep.
But is it as useful for a leader,
lazy.
though, to get, it's like the thing that separates it from our other watches that, makes you want to buy it, and then once you use it, you find other things to use it for?
Oh, I guess so. I mean, I guess that's something where you can say, this is going to be good for me. I'm going to buy this product because it's going to improve my
It's like
health.
the gym membership, you buy it and you spend a lot of money on it.
Gym membership
and
has been a big con. This idea that they get you to subscribe, pay lots of money, and then you sort of feel guilty about it. But I do think the the social dimension to fitness is really important. And we've got this little competitive thing going on in our family with, my wife and the kids, and we're all competing on steps, and it really makes it a bit more fun.
And they've animated these little reward badges and things, so it's kind of like, oh, I got a little bonus for
10,000 kilometers or something.
Yeah, this is how much I've done today. The interface, when you look at it on your watch, there's these 3 sort of rings: one for exercise, one for movement, and one for standing.
But the next step of this is to actually hook. I mean, your steps doesn't really mean a lot, but if your pulse rate is coming down after doing exercise, or your blood pressure is coming down, and there are Bluetooth blood pressure monitors that will hook in, for example. So you actually start to see actual health data correlating with your activity. And I think that can lead to sort of a long-term addiction to this sort of stuff rather than just the novelty.
Yeah, and what they've done is cleverly, they've said, here is the Apple Watch, but it's not coming out until 2015. So all the developers have plenty of time to start building their apps and
WatchKit.
Yeah, getting them going so that there should hopefully be a better ecosystem or constellation or whatever buzzword they're using for all the apps that you can get on this device.
Of course, it wasn't just the phone that was launched. There was also bigger phones. Some might even call them phablets, which is my least favourite term in the universe. It's right next to moist. For years, Apple were very comfortable with the shape of their phone, the size of their phone. Why did they change?
Well, I think they are responding to market pressure. Clearly, there's a lot of people who don't want to buy both a phone and a tablet, so they're looking for something in between. I like to put my phone in my pocket, so I want something that's small. And if you look on public transport, there's a lot of people holding on in the bus and using their phone with one hand, and that's always been Apple's argument, that if you make it too big, then you can't get your thumb all the way across. So
you can argue about aesthetics and things, but they've clearly they've followed the market, and they've always said that they're a market leader, but this was really interesting. They've become a real follower with this launch, I think.
All 3 of these products say, we've looked at the market, we've seen what the market's done, and now we'll get into it. They will have a huge impact on the market, particularly with the phone, but they can't really make the argument now that they lead at all.
What's going to be interesting is to see whether there's a whole lot of people who are on Android because they wanted a larger screen who now perhaps go, okay, now I can come back to Apple. Because I suspect there's a bit of envy both ways. People who use iOS devices go, oh, gee, that's really cool what you can get on Android. Why can't I get this on iOS, which is such a restricted environment? But I think there's people the other way who are saying, well, Apple doesn't do the device I want, so I'm going to stay on Android. Maybe we'll see a bunch of people come across now.
I think you'd have to be a really sort of ignorant head under the rock fanboy to think that your device offered everything you want. I switched to Android a while ago simply because of swipe typing. I just loved the feature. But there are little things that I miss about iPhone that I kind of go, I'd love to see that again. And now that there's a bigger device, you go, okay. But ultimately, I think there's a lot of people that kind of have pitched their flag in the dirt.
You can get swipe now for iOS though, can't you?
Yeah, there was
in iOS 8, there are plug-in keyboards, so people can do their own keyboards, and there'll be a swipe keyboard along with all the others.
Would you go back?
It's interesting. I think I'm used to working across platforms now. So I have a Mac at home, I have a PC at work, I have an Android phone. So potentially, I think there's some really cool features. But I mean, I've found things that I like. The open ecosystem for Android is something that I really just love. And I think that's probably what ultimately gets me over the line in the end.
All right, Download This Show is what you are listening to. We are in the studio with Claire Riley, who is the news editor for CNET, the technology website, and Peter Marks is an app developer and a tech commentator. You can hear him on RN Breakfast. Now, for a long time, pepper spray has been illegal in Australia for many, many, many good reasons. But over in the States, it's very commonplace, and there's a new startup called The Defender that are trying to improve the pepper spray by adding technology. What we're talking about here is when you pepper spray someone, it takes their photo and then it sends that photo via Bluetooth to your phone, which instantly goes to the emergency authorities. And all I can think about with this is all of the different ways it could possibly go wrong.
So many ways.
I think I would spray myself for sure, just setting it up or playing around with it. Or what does it do if it loses a Bluetooth connection? Does it just go off and tell you that way?
I love the idea of somebody get a tumbler of Defender fails.
Yeah.
What is this? Ah!
Yeah, the fact that it's going to take a photo right at the moment of impact of pepper spray. And this is not just like a little mild capsicum spray. This is the highest level pepper spray that you can get for law enforcement in the United States. This is a country that routinely rolls out tanks to its small town law enforcement agencies, so I don't want to touch that pepper spray.
Defender versus tank. There's a YouTube video I want to watch. All right, so let's we've played devil's advocate very early in this discussion. Where would it be useful, Peter?
Well, I guess if someone's expecting to be attacked or something, but I mean, really, if you're walking around thinking, gee, I'm at risk, this is not the way to do it. Carrying a weapon of any sort ends up with you having the weapon being used against yourself, because an attacker is probably more familiar with using things like this or
Unless
any
they
sort
look
of
at it and go, what the hell is this? Like, lady, I'm not going to even attack you because
What is this?
Make better decisions. I'll give that
You
back.
call that pepper spray?
Yeah, the idea being that, you can you spray the pepper spray, it takes a photo of your offender, it goes off to some central database, an alert system, and then law enforcement or security are sent to help you. But I like the idea that there's also quick contacts. So maybe mum or your partner, you could quickly buzz them using a little device. I think there's plenty of space for, if you're in trouble, just send out an alert message with a quick button.
There are systems that do that. There's monitor buttons for the elderly where you can just push a button and it rings up a centre.
I
mean, this is something the phone does already. It's just
the benefit
one more
is it's not you pulling out the phone and going, help me, which, might be. I think the biggest issue with this is that it sells a product based on fear, and it sells a product based on this very common myth of the monster in the bushes. I mean, if we're talking about women protecting themselves, that's where the Indiegogo ad was largely targeted. If you're going for that angle, those women are more likely to be attacked in their own home or by someone they know. So selling a product like that that's like, you are going to see some crazy guy in a red baseball cap who does a really great photo when he gets pepper sprayed, I think it's the wrong idea. And they're going to, I mean, like any product, you sell based on aspiration or you sell based on fear, and they've really gone for the fear angle here.
Is it a conceptual problem, or is it something that you could tweak in the application of it?
I have a conceptual problem with it because you are putting a pretty dangerous weapon in someone's hands. If I'm a little bit afraid and I feel like, oh, this person's coming on too strong, do I pepper spray them and cause them serious damage? Or
the chances are you're just going to annoy them,
and
then they're going to steal your phone.
Yeah, I just see it going so wrong in so many ways.
The battery will be flat.
You run out of pepper spray, so you've got this useless device.
You'll spray yourself.
You get a year of coverage under the plan. But I also think an Indiegogo group, I think they've tied themselves with a security service. But an Indiegogo,
and it's a subscription, so you're locking yourself in.
But how much are you going to, is a little sort of startup going to be able to provide a better security service than you might get with the local police, like calling up your local police and telling them you've got a problem?
I suppose that probably depends on how good your local police are.
Yeah,
and do they have tax?
But how broad is this security service? They kind of showed this car immediately driving to save you, but my first thought was like, do they have a car in your area?
They're going to ring you up and say, are you okay?
Excuse me, ma'am, have you got a problem? We're getting a message from you.
What is the role that technology does have to play in personal safety, in your mind?
Well, look, I think the fact that we all have mobile phones, and the stats are that a lot of people who are involved in a car accident call their own ambulance. They are able to just ring up and say, help, come and get me, and the 000 can talk to them and say,
where am I?
Where are
on the
you?
map here.
You can get the data from from the GPS. So really our safety is much better than it is. If I was building this product, I would make a case for the phone that had one button that plugged into the bottom that pushed help button, and that would be it, just part of the phone. So you could reach into your bag or your pocket and surreptitiously push that button.
Yeah,
there is a great app that was made around, I believe, the Occupy Wall Street movement, which is just an app where you pre-program it with 3 people to instantly send a text once you've been arrested. So you the moment you're being arrested, you press the button and it sends a text to mom, dad, lawyer. I've been arrested.
Don't have to waste your call. That's a good idea.
And there's, what's it called? There's a system for your car that monitors the car's operation. I think it's Accelerate or something like that. And one of the things it does, it hooks into your phone and it gathers stats on your fuel economy and everything. It detects if you crash the car, and it will make a call if you crash the car.
The other thing, I think it's less likely, and I think technology has been an absolute boon and it's been fantastic for personal safety, does come with its own flip side that, apps that can be used to detect your location for safety can also be used by a really controlling partner or something to sort of find out where you are. So there's always that dark side to the technology advancing. But I think largely it's been good for individuals.
Download this show is what you are listening to. It is your guide to the week in technology, the internet and culture. We're in the studio with Claire Riley from CNET, app developer Peter Marks, and Mark Fennell is my name. And this week, the Communications Minister, Malcolm Turnbull, did something many would regard as highly foolhardy. He hosted an online copyright infringement forum in Sydney, bringing together representatives from telecommunications companies, the television business, movie and music industries, and consumer advocates, and it was feisty, to say the least. But as a result, do we now, Peter, have a clear path to how to replace illegal downloading with a viable, timely, well-priced solution? Has he fixed it?
No. I mean, he tried to run a sort of Q&A style
I thought he
debate.
did rather well, to be honest with you. I thought he, full credit to Malcolm Turnbull, he did a very good job of managing.
He held it together and showed both sides, and he had a bit of humour in there, which was nice.
I mean, he clearly understands the issues from all perspectives, but there's no movement there. Well, maybe there is a bit of movement in that, Village Roadshow has realised that, no, they can't make a movie and release it in one country and,
Very good point. So obviously one of the big examples of piracy in the last year was the Lego movie, which was, of course, made here in Australia, but they held it for a couple of weeks. And Graham Burke, who's the very outspoken head of Village Roadshow, he did say, we held it until the holidays, which caused it to be pirated widely. No more. All our movies we'll now make will be day and date with the US. I know 20th Century Fox and Universal are too. That's a big statement. As somebody that, also reviews movies for a living, day and date is very common with the big films, but on average there's about a 20-day gap between when something comes out in the States or the UK to here. For him to make that promise, and we will be throwing it back in his face if he doesn't follow through on it, is a big deal. But the other thing with Graham Burke, Claire, is that he said he wasn't going to go to this thing. He said it was going to be filled with crazies.
Filled with crazies. Graham Burke is a very lovely guy. He's a great guy. And I just think it suits their business model to go day and date. I think the issue is not so much cinema releases, because I think people recognise that if they're pirating it, they're not going to get the same experience with Lego Movie or, Iron Man 3 if they go into a cinema versus pirating at home. I think the real issue with day and date is home entertainment releases and tightening the window. Now, he says that obviously there's got to be a commercial model. He said movies, there would be, quote, no movies if we got rid of the cinema distribution model, which I think is fair enough.
But isn't a lot of the cost, I mean, they talk about these movies costing $200 million or something. A lot of that money is because of marketing to build this huge hype amongst the viewers who are going to go to that window. They call them windows.
Yeah.
So the people who are going to queue up and go to the cinema on day one or, the first weekend, and they want that huge weekend. So that business model, it kind of feeds itself.
Look, just with that, the biggest damage to that, the reason that has emerged is that they get the maximum amount of money in that opening weekend, and then the money that they get back from the actual exhibitors diminishes week after week after week after back, which is why they've built up this very unusual, very expensive culture of spending something like 75% of your operating budget on marketing, so you get that absolute hype point at the first weekend, and then everything after that draws away. And it's actually a really bad system. When you think about it in this day and age, it's a really, really damaging system if what you're trying to build is a culture where people do kind of have a long tail. And for a lot of the films, it's interesting with Village Roadshow, they released an Australian film called Felony. The problem with Australian films is they don't have the marketing budget. And even though some of the Australian films released this year are actually very, very good, they're word-of-mouth films. They're not films that operate in a big hype budget.
That's what you want. I mean, the problem with the big weekend is people fall for the hype. They go along to the movie, they see the special effect, which they saw in the trailer, in the context of the whole film, and they're actually a bit disappointed.
I think, okay, so there's a couple of things at play here. So the smaller films go clever and they do they do a lot of PR. So we saw What We Do in the Shadows, that Kiwi low-budget vampire mockumentary. Clearly it didn't have a big budget, but I've heard more about that film because they were clever about it and they said, okay, what's our fun angle? All right, we got some of the guys from Flight of the Conchords. Let's go off that. So they're clever about it. Then there's other films that just have to go for that mass scattergun approach of just getting all the marketing out there. I don't have so much of an issue with the cinema model. I think that people still go to the movies. It's still a really fun pastime. But when you're competing home entertainment, when you're choosing between buying a DVD or borrowing, a Blu-ray from your local cinema store.
Got costs built into the distribution.
Absolutely.
It's an echo of the old record shop CD model where there was a time there in the 90s when we had to go to record shops, we had to pay $30 to get one track that we we wanted,
Yeah.
and there was no alternative. Suddenly Napster came along and blew it all apart.
Exactly,
But
and
they
they've been-
gripped onto the old model. And I
That's
think they're
the
doing the
problem.
same thing now.
They've been too slow to innovate.
Everyone wants to pay for talent. Everyone wants to pay for art. And I think what we need to do is come up with models which use the technology to make it cheaper for them to produce the movie. So they don't have to do the big weekend marketing
Yeah.
thing. They can, and they should be able to sell different resolutions where we pay in proportion to the resolution. So you should be able to hire the Lego movie on the first weekend on your phone for 99 cents. And you think, gee, that was a great movie. I'd like to go and see it at IMAX, and you'll pay again. And
The problem is exhibitors in that context, like the exhibitors, your Hoyts and people like that. Their model is their whole income is built on exclusivity, and there's been a couple of attempts in the US to close the gap between when a movie comes out in the cinema and when it comes out on DVD. And Disney found themselves in huge problems in the States with AMC, the cinema chain, where they basically did a blockade. So it's hard. The issue here is that exhibitors, it's their entire model.
That's
though.
a whole different problem. I think what we need to address first is home entertainment. So when they say we're releasing day and date, that's great, Village Roadshow, but they largely work, I think, almost exclusively in the inter-cinema distribution model. I think, there is an argument to say we can't do home entertainment in the same way that we do Spotify because the cost to produce an album is much less than the cost to produce a film. I think that's a legitimate argument. But when they say we're gonna go day and date, or we're gonna do this, or we're gonna offer this, it suits their business model. And Graham Burke said, my shareholders are happy because we're creating a new business model. You need to recognize that you need to create a business model that provides competitively priced content, content that is available easily for consumers, and that can be an innovative business model, that you don't have to hold on to old systems, which you say that this isn't going to work or that's not going to work. It's not going to work because it suits your outdated business model.
The other problem is that they're trying to find a technical solution to people pirating, which is very difficult, and it's an arms race.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's interesting that they're also, the media executives are also nervous about the number of Australians who use VPNs to get Netflix.
They didn't even mention
Now,
VPNs at the
these
Which I thought was
copyright forum.
interesting. So VPNs, for those of you who haven't used one before, it's basically a bit of software you can install that tells the internet that you're in another country, a country where you can legally pay to see Orange is the New Black or House of Cards on Netflix or something like that.
Now, I think that one of the reasons why there's such a lot of piracy in Australia is that we're actually a pretty technologically aware community. People are actually able to use these things, and clearly hundreds of thousands of people do. So, we might close off one thing, and then, the BBC this week was asking for ISPs to treat anyone who uses a VPN as a pirate, which is just nuts. A lot of people use VPNs for very good reasons.
And
the
IONet
BBC are now in the subscription TV business
Yeah.
globally,
right.
so it's very much in their interest to be saying things like that.
IONet made a big move saying that using Netflix is not illegal. The only thing
Choice
would
has
be...
also
actually
made that
pay.
argument
Yep.
as well. So-
Choice also said that, we've been paying a lot more for a long time, but now with the internet, we're actually starting to notice that. So I think that's the thing. So people are using VPNs, not mentioned at all, which was very disappointing. But that's how people who want to pay money, who want to access content, and they say, well, I'm not going to steal it, but I'm going to pay for my VPN. I'll pay Netflix, who are paying the artists to produce
Very
these
hard to
shows.
characterise those people as somehow breaking the law.
Absolutely,
They
and
might
that's
be
what they-
breaking terms of service or something.
I believe the technical term for it is extra legal. As in, it sits
What does that
outside.
mean?
It sits outside a framework, and it probably breaks terms and conditions.
Yeah, it breaks terms of service, and it's not actually against the law in the sense that it's not against legislation. But what could happen is that a provider would sue you for a breach of contract, saying that you broke the terms of service. But in what context is Netflix going to
gonna
come and
provide you?
sue
Netflix
someone?
is not gonna do it.
Yeah, Netflix is not going to sue you. So
They've got a customer. But look, I think the other big mistake being made here is to try and turn the ISPs into law enforcement,
It's
and to say
absolutely
that
not their
they're the ones who've got to
responsibility.
monitor your connections and what you're doing. Because really, we all want ISPs to be lean, mean, cheap deliverers of broadband, and we don't want them to be getting into that game. And I think they're right to be pushing back on that.
Yeah.
Well, not everybody doesn't want them to be getting in that game. 'Cause
Well,
one of
maybe the Foxtel broadband service would be interested.
Well, this is the thing. Foxtel, actually, well, you should tell us. What is it? Foxtel are moving into the broadband business now, and as part of that, they're saying they will actually be cracking down on pirators.
Who knew? So, yeah. It's all the same infrastructure. It's the same cable. So it's just a bundling deal to try and lock you in, I think.
If you're a consumer who does pirate, you would never, ever sign up to that broadband deal. Have they not just cut off their own, like as a marketing exercise? Is that not just a terrible thing for them to put out there?
Well, aren't they going to go further and maybe they'll throttle YouTube because they see it as a competitor to their cable service?
Well, that starts to step into issues of net neutrality, which is a very kind of sticky concept in the States. Which is basically this idea that currently the way the internet is operated is that all kinds of content, actually not all, most kinds of content are treated equally. It doesn't matter what the information moving past is, it kind of all goes at the same speed, and there's no priority given for different kinds of content. The one exception to that is emergency services, I believe. But they're talking about introducing tiered systems where, you know, Netflix is charged more for their bandwidth and things like that.
And so customers get a faster speed if they're using Netflix, and they pay more to get the sort of top tier of access. So you get a fast speed, but if you're just Joe consumer who's just, you know, Googling something every so often, sending emails, you might have a really low speed.
Yeah, and most parts of the United States are essentially monopolies when it comes to internet service providers. Like the different AT&T, Verizon, Comcast, they just have fiefdoms in certain states, and it's a very, very strange system. But the principle does carry over to Australia, and if you do start introducing this concept of different tiered speeds, what do you think the knock-on effect is from consumers? What are the sorts of choices consumers are going to make, Claire?
Look, I think they're going to start choosing that, you know, which ISP they're going to go for. I think the whole beauty of the internet is that it's democratized. As soon as you start, I'm a firm believer in net neutrality. As soon as you start splitting things up into a tiered system to the haves and have-nots, it just destroys something that was really awesome. And we had a really good thing going, and then it just went and got ruined. I hope that we're not in that area yet, but it is hard when you see rights holders asking for the right to say, we want to be able to dictate what ISPs have to do. We want to be able to go to court to protect our income streams. Now, they talk about the millions and millions of dollars that they're losing. Malcolm Turnbull at this forum the other night said, well, hold on, you're losing the money. You want to get that money back to impress your shareholders, Mr. Graham Burke and Mr. Freudenstein of Foxtel. Why shouldn't you be paying for an enforcement scheme such as a 3 strikes policy whereby ISPs have to send out, first of all, you have to detect, so Foxtel said there were 3 buckets of cost in that. You have to detect the piracy sites, detect the infringers, and then there's the cost of sending notices. Why should that all be absorbed by the ISPs? And what it's coming down to is money.
Who pays?
So who pays? And they could not agree on that because, like, just so strongly are the rights holders saying, well, we shouldn't have to pay for it. But I kind of agree with Malcolm and the ISPs saying, well, you know, you can chip in, but this is going to drop a whole bunch of money on your bottom line, and it's going to skim the cream off for us. You know, IINet is a publicly listed company. Why should they have to go and tell their shareholders?
There is one thing they all agreed on, though, which is that everybody on the panel agreed that government should pay. We shouldn't have to pay a thing. Government should pay.
Government should pay.
If you think back to the telephone, if we regarded the telephone as being the same as the internet, so that if you made a phone call to organise to rob a bank, that then the telephone company would somehow be liable for that. It's nuts. You would never do it. So it's just that we're focusing on the internet because maybe it's possible to do that kind of monitoring. But I think it should be, it's a service like water, like gas, like electricity, and it should be just neutral and not be tampered with.
What about the argument that they had an economist up from Spotify, the music streaming service, and they said they'd seen a 20% drop in piracy since Spotify had launched in Australia. Now, obviously, that's a very self-serving argument on the part of Spotify. But what are the principles you could take from that and apply, particularly to television? Because I think when we dealt with cinema, and cinema is a very complicated beast, but television, part of the reason why it is so popular is you can replicate a perfectly seamless TV experience via these technologies. So how, in the same way that you can replicate it with music, so what are the lessons that television could take from this?
Well, I think the lesson is that media consumption is changing. I mean, we don't need to buy and own media. And you could argue that we've never been able to buy and own media. I mean, we bought records, we bought CDs, and now we buy them again on iTunes. I mean, what are we buying?
And Spotify actually said that there's a whole new generation for whom the concept of ownership is completely foreign.
No one wants to have
just wait till they try and buy a house. They'll really discover that.
I just want to stream my house, man. Like, why can't I just get it and then use that later? Like, it's
media is a compendium of your acting.
Crazy voice Claire.
I mean, media is just, it's an ephemeral thing that you access it for a period of time, you use it, you may come back and view or listen to it again in the future. And I think it makes sense to pay for that access, but not to, I mean, you don't want to back it all up at your house. I know we can buy 8 terabyte drives now.
I want them like my books. I want to be able to hold on to them. I want them to have some sort of digital dust on them that I occasionally,
they come up on your
Yeah,
screensaver.
Yeah, exactly. In Australia, we're so technologically advanced, we're savvy, we're early adopters in a lot of respects, but we're so behind in terms of what we're given and what we have access to. We want to be able to pay for it. We want to be able to use things. But it's just not possible at the moment. And so the question of access is really a really significant problem.
We've got to stop gripping onto the old models and let's talk about books one day.
Very big thank you to Claire Riley from CNET Australia. Thank you so much for coming back on the show.
I'm so glad I could embarrass myself once again.
The pleasure, I promise you, was entirely ours. And Peter Marks, always fantastic to have you back again.
Thanks, Mark.
And you can catch Peter Marks on RM Breakfast with Fran Kelly. And don't forget, as I said before, absolutely subscribe. As always, I never know where the button is on the screen. Find it, click on it. So much great content on the RN YouTube channel. My name has been Mark Fennell, and thank you for watching another episode of Download This Show.